quit focusing on the negative. You know, even when I was younger, I would focus a lot on what the negative that could happen. I used to stress out horribly. Even if I was like a couple of minutes late to school, oh my God, what's going to happen? You
Hmm.
know, that used to be the kind of person that I was, even when I was like super young. So I guess it would just be that quit focusing on the negative.
It's Johnny Late Night! And now here's your host, Johnny Rogers!
I guess the one word that comes to my mind is gratitude.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. Why does gratitude stand out to you as a word?
So I've actually been working with my therapist on finding little day-to-day things to be grateful for. And it's been really humbling as an experience. So what he's having me do is like at the end of the day, just write down three things that I'm grateful for and write down why I'm grateful for those things and why I'm grateful that they happened in that specific day. Um, and it's really nice to be able to just stop and think about, what happened and
Hmm.
take that moment to kind of take pause and not just like kind of give surface level like thanks for what you're going through, but to be actually grateful for what you're doing and what you're going through.
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. Have you ever heard of the 5 minute journal?
Vaguely. It sounds
It's
vaguely familiar.
it's really good. I'm terrible at it, but I get the like to be honest, I'm so bad at like writing in it, but the concept behind it is like you have this journal next to your nightstand and in the morning you take like 5 minutes at the start of your day and you write down like three things that you really want to get done that day. And I think there's like maybe like an affirmation or something, how people always write stuff like being grateful would be one of them. For example, like I am grateful for everything that I have in my life. That's like an affirmation that you can say out loud to yourself to kind of get your day started. And I was like, I like these morning routines that are supposed to like better us as humans, and I know all of the things I'm supposed to be doing, but it's so hard to keep up like a habit of these things. Like
Right.
kudos to you to going to therapy. Like there's lots of people who avoid that for years, like they don't really see the need in it, or they are like, oh, I'm busy, I don't have time for that. What made you want to start, getting into that, unless it's too personal of a topic?
Um, I went through a really bad breakup, and during that relationship, it was really not a good situation. It was really toxic for both me and my ex. And I was that person that after I think almost 2 years, I was avoiding going to counseling, avoiding getting help, even though I was wrecked for a long time after that breakup. And I eventually, I'm like, you know what? I've done the initial healing of like, okay, I've gotten through the initial part of the breakup, but I know that there's more healing that I can do.
Hmm.
Where do I go from here? And that's what got me started into seeing my therapist. And I've been doing that for about 6 months, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's nice to have just that extra person who you can talk to that doesn't really have like they don't have a personal stake in your life. Like you
Yeah,
could go to a family member, you could go to a friend, but like they're gonna always bring their own biases of like how they see you. But a therapist is like you can literally tell them anything, and it's patient, doctor confidentiality, so it's not like they're gonna go tell anyone what your problems were. So that's kind of like that's how honestly therapy should be sold to people. Is like, hey, this is like a vent session. Like go in
right,
there and say everything you want to say that if you said that to anyone else, they would look at you differently. The
right,
therapist is just gonna like pick it apart.
right, right,
Relationship trauma too is like difficult because it's one of those things that like if you don't give yourself enough time and you try to get into another relationship right away, you might carry over those bad habits without even realizing it.
Right. And, you know, I noticed it even with waiting. I started dating my now fiance, and both of us have gone through some but I realized that my side of it was starting to affect how I interacted, not only just with my family and my friends, but with him as well. And that was another writing factor of my going to counseling. I'm like, I don't want this to wreck this relationship too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's good too, because then you're at least like, there's, it's not just about working through it for you. It's like, oh, I'm doing this because I want to preserve this thing that I love so much, this bond, this relationship with this other person.
right, right. And that was really important to me. So I thought it was important to work on myself,
Mm-hmm.
not obviously mostly for me, but then to also work on this relationship.
Yeah. And I like the word gratitude as well, because like people think that gratitude is just, stuff that's like, oh, I'm grateful for this thing in my life. But I think
Mm-hmm.
like gratitude can also be applied in other ways, like when it comes to giving to people, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have all this gratitude in your life, it makes it so much easier to, help someone else out and then make them
Right.
be grateful for that and kind of passing the gratitude along.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've been telling people in my life about like this, going back to what I had mentioned earlier, how my therapist is having me write down these things. And it is kind of interesting to see their reactions on it too,
Mm-hmm.
and realize oh shit, maybe I should be doing it too, saying that how it's working for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's been really awesome.
Now, do you have any like personal passions that you're pursuing for yourself? Is there like something outside of just regular work? I love talking to people about like what kind of brings them joy, because I find myself doing that a lot where I'm doing something that pays the bills, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
also like these other things that truly bring me joy that I'll put equal amount of time and effort into.
Right. And I don't know if you count this or not, but I'm going to school for psychology.
Oh,
Um,
nice. So your therapist influenced you.
yeah. Actually, I was in my bachelor's program prior to
Nice.
going to therapy.
Okay, so you learned about it and then you're like, oh, I gotta check this out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so because I'm really passionate about true crime, I love learning about that kind of thing, why people do the things they do and what their mindset is about it.
Hmm.
So that's probably one of my biggest passions as of right now. That and music, but I'm extremely shy when it comes to my voice. So I don't really like do any performances or anything, but one can dream.
No, but it's nice to have those like side things that you also do, like the other things that bring you joy, right? Like I like to tell a lot of people who are passionate about like an art of some kind is that it doesn't need to be your profession. Like it doesn't need to be. So people put so much pressure on themselves when they're learning or when they're trying to like produce something, whether it's a painting or like making a song. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
you almost should just make it for yourself, that was
Right.
like the whole concept behind me doing that album during the COVID was like I'm just making this for myself. Like I know it's not I don't have the best sounding voice. I'm well aware of that, but it was just fun for me to do. And it actually like got rid of I always used to have a very closed mind when it came to trying new things. I would be like, "No, I don't want to because of X, Y, and Z," or I think like it's I don't like how this sounds or it's not as good as X or whatever. And then I was finally just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it. Like,
Right.
you get to a point where you're just like, I don't care what anyone thinks, and like, meaning anyone that's not like your loved ones and like personal family, right? Like, you should care a little bit what your family and loved ones think.
Right. And that's another thing too. I mean, I've been trying to get more out there as I've been kind of building my own self-confidence. I've been trying to kind of get out there more and not really give two shits what people think. And it, like you said, I care about what my closest people think, like my family, my friends, there's always going to be some aspect of that. But as far as the external world, I'm getting to a place where I don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. There's too many people to care. There's too many people.
Right. Yeah.
you know?
And it's literally impossible to please everyone, because the
Exactly.
minute
Yeah.
you please this person, this other
Yeah.
person's going to be mad that you're doing the one thing you did to please the first person.
Exactly. Yeah. Even Elvis. Did you see the new Elvis movie? I feel like I've
I
talked about this on every
haven't.
podcast.
I
It's really
I
good. It's really
I've
good.
I've been wanting to see it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
It's a long movie, so I understand that it's like a 3 hour movie or something, but
Holy
it
shit.
flies. It honestly flies by. But there's a scene in there that stood out to me so much is his manager is kind of this crooked guy, right, who really like screwed Elvis over, and there's this whole thing with him, but like he started the first ever like merch line for like a single person, right? For
Mm-hmm.
Elvis, he was making all this Elvis merch to sell at the show so that he could make more money. And there's a scene where they pick up these like pins, these buttons, and one says like Elvis is the best, and then another one says Elvis sucks. Because he was like, we know that people hate Elvis. We know that people love Elvis, but we know that there's people that also hate Elvis, and we're gonna get money from them too. Like,
Right.
then that's the ultimate psychology, though, is just like, yeah, whether you like it or you hated it, you're still watching. Like
Yeah.
you're still engaged, you're still counting toward. So it kind of takes the power away from the people that are hating on you because they're actually helping you.
Right. I was watching the other day, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there was an acceptance speech by Cardi B that where she also thanked her haters for
It's
buying her music
like
because it
classic
helped
Cardi B.
her. So I mean, it really goes back to that. And it, it also reminds me of like different Instagram comments, like people are like, why is this showing up on my feed? I don't want to see this. Well, you're engaging in it, so it's
Yeah,
only going to help them.
I thought for sure everyone knew that like if you comment on something, the algorithm is just going to feed you more of that.
Right.
Like, so you leaving an angry comment literally is working against your own interests. You're just getting fed more things that make you angry. And you're like, oh, why is my feed so terrible? It's like, because you're leaving negative comments on horrible things.
No, right.
I don't get it. Like, even when it was like TV, if my parents didn't like something on the TV, they just turned it off or they changed the channel. They didn't say anything. My dad was never like, that sucks, and changed the channel. He never said anything. He just changed it. I don't like that. Changed it. And I was like, why can't people do that? It's even easier with social media. You just swipe to something else, or you
Yeah.
unfollow, or you hide, or you block. There's like 20 different options to never see the thing pissing you off, but people like it.
Yeah. I think it's sort of a thing of, yeah, people are going to get pissed off, but they like being pissed off. They want
Mm-hmm.
to find something to be pissed off about,
A
you
thousand
know?
percent. Yeah. I don't know. It's just a weird phase in human psychology, really,
Oh,
when you
yeah.
look at like what the internet's done. I mean, just I went from having no fans to being on, Inform Overload and those top 10 channels. And now there's people leaving all kinds of comments about like the way that I talk, or, what kind of shirt I was wearing that day, or if they didn't like what I was talking about, they were going to let me know, or you're wrong, or like,
Right.
so it got to a point where it's like, you can't even look at any of the comments, good or bad. Like it all just has to be like, it's just a thing that's there and you can't
Right.
even pay attention to it because it just stops the whole creative process. So like putting all the haters and the people that love you aside, what kind of music would you make without any like regard for, a limit, a block?
I feel like it would probably be some cross between country and R&B, because those are the two like major genres that have influenced my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess more along the lines of like country meets the weekend.
Nice. It's good to have an elevator pitch for your music too.
Yeah,
Like
right,
mine's clearly music you could roll a joint to. Like this is just right on the
right.
cover.
Yeah. So I guess for me, it would be that, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. Country meets the
Hmm.
weekend.
So who's so we got the weekend on that side, but who's your biggest like country influences?
Rascal Flats would be probably my number one. I was introduced to their music when I was 12
Mm.
and just never quit listening. So,
What was I
them.
listening to at 12? Oh, I think I was listening to like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC. Very
I
rock and
mean,
roll heavy household.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, there was always like somewhat of a mix of that. My dad is huge into the 80s rock bands, and my mom's kind of all over the place as far as her music tastes. So I grew up listening to both, really. Somewhat of that cross, and then rock and roll. Queen was a big one because that's my dad's favorite band.
Hmm.
Um, so there was always somewhat of that influence. I One of the last jobs I was working, actually, um my coworker asked me what my favorite kind of genre of music was, and at the time it was country, because at the time I was a fan of The Weeknd back then, but I wasn't like quite as into it as I am now. And so I told her country, and she was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I would have figured your favorite would have been rock."
She just
So,
assumed.
yeah.
You're like, I
Because
know I'm wearing a Rolling Stone shirt right now, but surprisingly, I like Conway Twitty. You just have some.
literally though, because I mean, going on a day-to-day basis, this is what I wear: the bracelets, the rings, all of it. I kind of look the
Yeah, yeah, I
part.
could see that.
So,
Like you like checking out like indie rock bands at like a local bar or something.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't surprising in any means, but it
Yeah.
was kind of funny to, oh, well, this is what I thought you would have been into.
Hey everybody, Johnny here. Just want to take a quick second to thank our newest Patreon subscriber, CLB. I appreciate your support, and because you are subscribed to the show for just $1 a month, you're getting this episode before anyone else. If you want to be cool like CLB, head to patreon.com/TheJohnnyRogers and join in on the fun. All right, now back to the episode. It's so funny how people can make assumptions off of just like the way that you carry yourself or the way that you dress, and they'll just assume all of your interests immediately.
Right.
And most of the time they're right. That's the funniest thing. Is like it's like 80% of the time they're like dead on with like everything that you like. Like I just want to see one like cowboy. He's got like the cowboy hat on and boots, and he's like, "No, man, I like hip hop." Like just
Right.
complete opposite of what they thought it was gonna be. They're like, "This guy loves country for sure. He loves country and cold beers." And he's like, "No, I like White Claw and I like
Right.
21 Savage."
I'm sure it's out there
I'm
somewhere.
sure, yeah. But that's the beautiful thing about music and where you grow up and your whole upbringing too. And like, I just love encouraging like people to pursue arts with no block, to just like get that sound out of your head. Like if you have poems or like like rhymes that you've come up with for songs and lyrics, and these things are just like kind of coming to you. It's almost like you just got to get it out of your head and get it onto a track or something.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, actually. I started writing poems. Oh God, I think I was in middle school. Got into it more when I started high school, and it's been an absolute saving grace. Because I am the type of person to get really in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to have an outlet to get out of my head and onto paper.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like a different thing. Even when you vocalize stuff, it's a different thing. Like I found if you are again, negative about something, if we want to go to negativity, if you're like, oh, I suck, or like, oh, I can't do, if you're like, oh, I'm such a klutz, and you say that out loud, chances are you're going to be more likely to trip over something. Because there's
Yeah,
something about vocalizing it or writing it down. Writing stuff down for me is like more of a memory tool. Like writing, if I write out my comedy act and like the words that I'm saying, it sticks better for me. But I love the kind of free flow of writing, of just getting the thoughts out of your head. And oh, who is it? There's this really great author. I think it might have been Stephen Pressfield. I think so. He has this book called The War of Art. It's so good. And it's a quick read. It's like very, very small, but like the stuff in it is just amazing. And he's talking about how he doesn't believe that there's like such thing as like writer's block. You know, people say that they get writer's block. He's like, there's just a fear of failure, like a fear of having a bad idea. And he's like, what you really need to do is just write everything that you're thinking, or type out everything that you're thinking, and just let it kind of flow out of you. And through the bad ideas, you'll eventually get to a good idea, and you'll get to a great poem. And then, but you won't ever get there unless you get this out of your head.
right. It's almost like a sort of manifestation tool, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you put it out into existence, like you said, like if you vocalize I'm a klutz, you're probably going to trip over something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know it's setting up the occurrence for it to happen. you know
Yeah.
so in that sense, I would agree with that. Like, there's not, and it's okay to be afraid. That everyone's got that element of fear,
Mm-hmm.
but in my mind, it's more how you deal with that fear that could either make or break what you're doing.
Yeah, like if you look like great performers, right? Like people who walk out onto a stage and there's 20,000 people in front of them just screaming, like that could be a really scary moment, or it could be the moment where you just step up and you just,
Yeah,
whatever it is that you're doing, comedy or music or performing, like there's those real, like, whoa, it's like makes a legend in that moment, somebody that could face their fear. Or a firefighter, something as simple as a firefighter running into a house that's on fire. Like they recognize that there is like a fear that like something bad is going to happen, but it's going to be amazing if they can get in there and save the people inside. Like that's
exactly.
the motivation, right?
Yeah. And I like that you bring that up, because the one thing that kind of popped in my head as you were saying that is either step up or step out. you know
Mm.
no matter if it's like stepping out in front of a crowd of 20,000 people, or it's um running into a burning house. Like, if you can do it, then do it. you know
Mm-hmm.
um I was actually at a concert here just back in November. My parents had taken my fiance and I to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra,
Oh, nice.
and the entire pretty much the entire place was sold out. And I'm like, yeah, we were talking on the way back, and I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of people that are there in that stadium. I and I have mad respect for people who do that every night, or law enforcement, or any of it. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do what they do, and it's not for everyone. And
Yeah.
I feel like, if you know that it's not for you, then allow space for the person who can do it to do it.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah, hence the step up or step out of the way, basically.
yeah, pretty much.
It is interesting though that there's like a slot for everyone in doing something. Like everyone has like something as simple as like a show running. There's so many different responsibilities, and yet somehow they all come together at the same time, right? Like just you get a group of motivated people together and you could do anything.
Yeah, yeah. And I work in the education system, so people are like, oh my gosh, you do God's work, I could never do that. It it's hard. I especially nowadays, given how many school shootings hit the news, it's terrifying.
Yeah, that
There's
is
not a day,
crazy. I
there's not
never
a
even
day,
thought about that.
yeah, you know, and the, for someone like me, I'm a total empath, so I understand like there's a lot of fear going on around that. And then also being in that situation, there's really not a day that I don't go into work there where there's not some sort of at least mild fear in the back of my mind. But at the same time, it's really like any other job. Freak accidents happen all the time, you know,
Hmm.
wild shit happens all the time. So I can't let that fear stop me from doing my job, you
Yeah.
know?
I just saw something because I used to live in Toronto, and I've been seeing a lot of like really scary stuff happening with the subway system, like just people getting attacked, or so many different things, like so many different types of offenders too. And somebody was like, the news people were like, does this make you scared to ride the subway? Do you feel like it's not safe? And they're like, well, like a little bit, but it's not. The subway isn't causing the violence. That's just where it happened to happen. Like, it just had to happen there because it just did. What it really is a problem of like mental illness in the city, or like people being provoked in these situations. It's not like a subway operator pushed someone onto the tracks. Like, they just happened to run into somebody who just wasn't well in their mind, and they attacked them. It could have happened out on the street. It could have happened anywhere, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it is such a fine balance to recognize that there is a potential for danger, take that into consideration, push forwards anyways, because again, you have that underlying motivation. There's something, you're trying to help kids. You work in the education system. That's the motivation, right? But recognizing that there is that potential danger is, I mean, kudos to you.
Thanks. And that's a kind of exactly the thing, I mean, these accidents, these shootings, whatever you want to call them, they really could happen, like you said, anywhere, so it's not a matter of it's the education system's fault that it happens to be happening in the schools. It's the fact that someone, like you said, is just not right, is not
Mm-hmm.
well, and something led them to carrying that out, for
And
whatever
just going to
reason.
Walmart and buying a gun.
Yeah,
It blows
you
my
know,
mind. Walmart's in America is a different type of store than the ones that
bro,
we
it
ever
is a
get.
whole different beast.
Crazy.
It's wild, man. But, it really comes down to that. It really comes down to something somewhere failed that person,
Hmm.
and that's how they ended up getting to that point,
Yeah.
because there may not even be like specific blame on this person or that person. It could have just been something, you know, and one thing leads to another, It's
Most of the time, it's just like a really most trauma is something happened at childhood. Something horrible happened while this person was a child, and it's just shaped their brain in such a way where it's not fitting in, or they don't feel like they fit in a certain way. And then there's no one, and then on top of that, there's no one around them that they can trust. And then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
right, and it it could really happen to anyone, you know. There have been several periods that could have broken someone that, that it's almost like that kind of pivotal moment where it either breaks them psychologically or it makes them stronger. And it really depends on the person, you
Yeah,
know?
what a sick roll of the dice.
Yeah.
You're like, will this break me or will this make me stronger? I don't like
Right.
those odds.
Right.
50-50 split, come on.
Right.
You're like, you can't even come out halfway unscathed if something terribly traumatic happens to you. It's exactly what you said. It's literally 50-50. Like, so
Yeah.
grateful for the mind that I have, and the childhood that I have, and like, there's could be so much worse. So much worse. I love that like your word for this episode was gratitude. I don't know if you know, or I'm sure because you've listened to a couple of podcasts, but I want to ask you the question. The question that I always turn on the guest is, if you can make a phone call to 15-year-old Mo and give her a piece of advice, knowing what you know now, doesn't affect your current timeline, but what piece of advice would you give your 15-year-old self?
Quit focusing on the negative. You know, even when I was younger, I would focus a lot on what the negative that could happen. I used to stress out horribly. Even if I was like a couple of minutes late to school, oh my God, what's going to happen? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that used to be the kind of person that I was, even when I was like super young. So I guess it would just be that, quit focusing on the negative.
That's great. I love that piece of advice. Do you want to, because I know some people are, if I have like a comedian on the show or an actor or somebody who's always on social media, I pull up their social media and share it with everybody to follow them, no problem. Are you comfortable with that as well?
Yeah.
Sharing of your social media? Because I don't want to blast some people are like, no, don't do that. That's my Finsta. Have you heard of Finstas? I've never had a Finsta in my life. That's a term that I just learned recently.
I've heard of it. I've known maybe a handful of people that have had one, but I don't. So go
That's
for it.
crazy. So it's Ramet?
Ramet.
Ramet. There you go. Should have went French on it. I went to sound it out.
It happens all the time. I'm not worried about it.
You're like, I've heard that 1,000 times.
Oh yeah.
Well, Ramet, thank you so much for making the time to come on the show. I really, really appreciate it. I'll shoot you over this link whenever I get it edited and up. This is episode 60. How am I forgetting? 68. 68. Yeah. So we got a couple more, but then you'll be out on the Johnny Rogers show.
All right. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, of course. Hope you have a great night.
You too.
You've been listening to The Johnny Rogers Show. New episodes air every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.